two things. The first thing is the expansion of higher education. And the second thing is the expansion of higher education to not just those already advantaged people, to those in the highest economic groups, but the expansion of educational opportunities to all. So in other words, the equalization of opportunities to go to university. Okay, this process of widening participation, the UK started in the early 1990s, and it's still going on to this day. Why do I want to talk about the UK? Well, what's very interesting about what happened in the 1990s in the UK is that there are some real parallels, some real similarities with what Uzbekistan is going through at the moment, with the broadening and the widening of participation. And actually, also, the UK was in quite a similar position to Uzbekistan in terms of higher education. If we go back to 1990, it was in a similar position in 1990 to Uzbekistan now. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing is that education in the UK at the higher level, at the tertiary level, was really for an elite group. It was for just around 12 or 13% of young people level is very similar to the Uzbek level at the moment. From the data that I could find, it's about 13 or 14% of young people go to university. Now, the problem with that is that that's a very low level. The World Bank has noted that Uzbekistan has one of the lowest level of participation in higher education of any middle-income country. And the UK was in a very similar situation. It had very low rates of participation in higher education at that time. So the UK set about this process of expansion of higher education, but also widening participation to those in less advantaged positions. And it had low participation among women. And again, this is very true for Uzbekistan, of men. So why would you want to widen participation? Well, for example, the Millennium Goals, Development Goals, which specifies that there should be greater equality between people of different genders, about everybody should have higher education. Hello, can you hear me? Can you
it's
hear me?
a bad signal, but yes, we can hear you.
How much did you miss of what I spoke about? Did you miss much? Okay, I'll continue anyway.
Last 3 minutes, please repeat last 3 minutes, Alan.
Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. So I was trying to explain why, what the motivation is to widen participation. One is that the Millennium Goals, the movement towards greater equality, particularly between men and women. Another reason is the moral reason that Uzbekistan should be operating as a meritocracy. By a meritocracy, we mean people of different social backgrounds should have an equal opportunity to experience higher education. And again, this was a very important motivation in the UK for widening participation, widening to less advantaged groups. It's a sad fact that in Uzbekistan, the top 20% of the income distribution fill 60% of all university places. So there's big inequalities here in terms of opportunity. But there's also an economic imperative, and the economic imperative is that you have a fast-growing economy. You need entrepreneurs. You need people with those skills. And 13% participation rate in higher education, it simply isn't enough. Now, I am aware that things are happening in Uzbekistan towards widening participation. In particular, the number of students going to university, the yearly cap in the number of students who go to university has been increasing. And there's recently been a decree to try and pilot 10 universities and that those universities will increase their student numbers. So things are changing. But what happened in the UK? Well, the UK commissioned a report in the 1990s called the Deering Report. And this is a very important report because it set out in very careful ways how widening participation should take place. So what kind of policies should have been adopted? Now, the funding system for British universities in many ways was quite similar to the system in Uzbekistan. And that is, it used to be funded directly by government grants. The only difference was that students didn't pay fees for their education. So how do you go about expanding higher education? Well, there's a big problem here, of course, and one of them is cost. So who pays for it? It's either got to be the government or it's got to be the student or the parents of the student. The other issue is not wanting to see a drop in quality. You know, when supply tends to increase of something, the quality often reduces. The proposal was that the students should pay. And this was a very controversial thing in the UK. And Deering argued that the public simply won't pay through taxes. Which would mean spending and pay for it. The reason why he said students should pay for their education is that he believed that it would marketize universities. In other words, the money would follow the student. When money follows the student, the university tends to be much more reactive, much more imaginative in the way that it produces its courses. Okay, so the student has to pay. But how do they pay? Because the full cost of education is extremely high. What he proposed is a system of student loans. Now, again, I'm aware in Uzbekistan that you have student loans, but the way student loans work in the UK is rather different. The UK student loan system works by, the loans are given out by a British state-owned bank, if you like, and that student loan company gives out the full cost of tuition fees to students and at very low interest rates. Now, the most important part of the student loan deal is that students don't have to pay back that money until they're earning, I think it's about £25,000 a year. And so for many students, they can work for a number of years before they have to start paying it back. And then they pay it back in very small amounts. And they can pay it back over 30 or more years. That's quite different than the Uzbek system of payments, where payment has to start straight or very soon after graduation, and there's only a limited number of years to pay it back. That acts as a big disincentive for students to create debt because it has to be paid back so quickly. However, the British system means that, yes, students are creating large amounts of debt, but that they'll be paying it back at small amounts over a very long period of time. This is what I believe to be the single most important lesson that Uzbekistan needs to take on board, a reformulation of the loan system. Okay. The other thing I wanted to do, obviously, as I've already said, is to widen participation. And widening participation could be seen as a problem if you're going to charge students the full cost of their education. But as I said, the fact that the loans were paid back in such small amounts over such a long period of time meant that poorer students weren't put off. They weren't put off by the prospect of racking up 40, 50, 60,000 of debt. The other thing that was recommended in the Deering report was that poorer students given some government grants to help them. So that is mainly, that's the key strategy. There are some other elements as well that are very important, and again, things that I think Uzbekistan should take on board. One was the deregulation of the university system. So back in the 1990s in the UK, the government had very tight control over the educational system, and that meant a lack of innovation in the types of degrees that were on offer, and change was very slow. And that was because the money came directly from government, and also the government had a big say in the kind of education that was being produced at universities. And Deering argued that universities needed to have not only their own funds, but their own, the ability to make their own decisions about the type of education they provided. So the government pulled back and allowed more universities to develop, and more universities to have degree awarding powers. Another very important thing that it did is it removed the cap on student numbers. And again, I think that's a very important lesson, that student numbers at the moment, as I'm aware, in Uzbekistan, there's a cap, and only about 1 in 10 students gets to go to university. Why? Well, if the state pays for it, it has to keep a cap on costs. But when students pay for their education, the cap can be removed. So universities expanded, students had the money because they had these loans, and very, very quickly, the number of students going to university increased dramatically. The other thing that Deering recommended, as I've mentioned, is marketization of universities. So universities becoming income generating bodies. So universities began to recruit overseas students because they kept the money from overseas students. The British government changed its laws around visa requirements for students and made it much easier for students to study. And overseas students is now a very big source of UK revenue. Also, marketization meant that universities were allowed to link up with businesses and set up campuses, partly funded by businesses and business partnerships. The incentive for universities was, of course, as I said, the money goes to them rather than going to the government. The result of all of that has been, I mean, I've been at British universities working with them for 25 years and studying and working for well over 30 years. There's been a massive change. The investment in the infrastructure, the new courses that have developed has been quite amazing. This happened really for two key reasons. One was that government removed itself from regulating in minute detail universities, gave them freedom. It removed caps, and the other is that it allowed universities to make their own money and charge the full rate of costs to students. Just one final point before I open up for discussion. There is still regulation in the British university system. The government still does play a role. And it plays a role in a couple of ways. It has a Office for Students, which is a quality control body. And this quality control body sets down regulations about the quality of the teaching, validation every few years, for example. And it also sets out regulations for widening participation. So each university must have special outreach programs to try and recruit students from schools, It must submit data, very clear, up-to-date data about its widening participation, how many people it's brought in from poorer backgrounds, and it must produce written action plans. So there are some regulations, but apart from that, the universities are generally free to do what they wish in terms of income generation. Okay, 1 minute. Has it been a success or not? Yes, it has. There's been a massive increase in student numbers, and it's come without the taxpayer having to pay a large fee for it. So now we have 50% of young people going to university. What's happened in terms of quality? Quality is remarkably high. You probably know that UK universities are ranked within the top 100 universities very frequently, and they're only beaten by US universities. What about widening participation? There's been great gains here. Despite the cost of the university, the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest in terms of attendance at the university has reduced significantly. So back in 2000, if we look at the top 20% of the income distribution, they were 5 times more likely to go to university than the bottom 20%. Now they're only twice as likely. So things have improved quite a lot, and gender distribution, women are now more likely to be at university than men. Okay, what I want to hear from you is how much of this can be transferred across to Uzbekistan? Am I just dreaming about what could happen? Is the context different? What kind of lessons do you think there are?
Just want to tell you that we are making summary of every report, and all of your recommendations would be recorded and presented to the governmental bodies when the week would be finished. So everything you have presented here, I'm going to record and suggest to the government to adopt. So that's a very good suggestion.
Okay, I'm happy to write a summary report, just because there's other things I wanted to say as well, but I just wanted to get across these central, the most important things is about funding and giving greater autonomy to universities. And I know it's very good for the government to want to release control, but the problem in Uzbekistan is degree programs tend to be very rigid, inflexible, and greater flexibility needs to occur to recruit more students from a wider range of backgrounds. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, Alan, it's a very valuable, suggestion. So if you will outline it somehow and, put, if you have some more bullet points to add, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I do. And as I said, I think the other thing to emphasize is it's a big step for a country to make to reform the system of payment. But it seems to me that the loan system is not working very well. Very few students take loans in Uzbekistan. I understand there's cultural reasons why that might be so. But it's also true in Britain. People weren't used to paying for their education. It was a big upheaval. But the loan system at the moment puts off students from going to private schools, but because of the repayment terms and the interest. And I think the government may have a role here to reformulate, to restructure the student loan system. Anybody else, please, comments?
Colleagues, please.
Silence, oh dear.
Natasha, do you have anything to add? What do you agree with the suggestions?
Yes, Victoria, I think I greatly agree with the suggestions, and to be honest, I don't think I have any points to add. I think I need to dig a bit deeper into what is yet to be done in case of Uzbekistan. But
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I wanted to say, which I haven't really touched on, is there's real problems with widening participation, because the reason young people from poorer backgrounds don't go to university are not just about cost. It's not just about the cost. There's more deep-seated reasons. So children from poorer backgrounds, they live in environments where they don't have as many books, they don't have as many resources, and they often don't know about university system. They don't know about the advantages it can bring. They often go to schools that are not terribly well equipped to educate the students for university. And sometimes the university selection policies tend to work against people from poorer backgrounds. And because of the formal qualifications that are required, these students may not have all the formal qualifications, and it makes it very difficult. So what's happened in the UK is that universities are being instructed to go to poorer areas, to go to these programs where universities, so I used to go to schools quite often, do presentations, and try and recruit or try and talk to poorer students to encourage them to apply to university. And also university selection policies changed where they accept alternative qualifications, sometimes work experience as well. And as I said, the government made universities do this because the government still pays a very small fraction of university fees. And the deal was, you don't get this small fee if you don't have all of the programs. Now that has been very successful. There is one negative thing in all of this, and that is, although students from poorer backgrounds are more likely to go to university, if we rank universities from the very best, like Oxford and Cambridge, to the next rank down, like the universities I used to work in, like Bath and so on, and then we go down to the lower ranked universities, we find that the students who do get to university, the poorer students who get to university, tend to only go to the lower ranked universities. They don't get to the Oxford and Cambridge, and that's still a big problem. So they are getting to university, but they're not getting to the good university. I hope you heard all of that, because I think my signal might have broken up.
No, we can hear you well. And
so could someone tell me a little bit about, I mean, what reservations do you have? What problems do you have with what I've suggested? What problems do you see ahead for Uzbekistan in terms of broadening education?
well, Alan, I'm not sure. This again, maybe that's my personal opinion again as a female, but I'm not sure if in the UK you still have the same gender issues there as well, because here, basically, when the resources are scarce and family has to decide whom to educate, often the choice is not in the favor of the girls, because normally girls, they just, they tend to get married early and then just have their families, and normally they really do not join the workforce, and they're not really, basically there's not a lot of return on that investment. I'm not saying about, I mean, of course, educated mother gives a lot to their families, but I think that the overall culture and the gender issue probably was a bit less significant in the UK.
Well, that's interesting. That's partly true, but when I grew up in the 1970s, most women didn't work, and most women gave birth quite early in their lives. So if you go back Britain 40 odd years ago, things probably weren't so different. But I think one of the advantages of having a loans system, and this loan system, by the way, is not a loan that the parents take out, the individual takes out, and it means that individuals don't have to go to their parents to ask to borrow money. They just have a contract with the student loan company and can make their own decisions. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there are deeper cultural, I mean, that's the reason I'm a sociologist. I love all of this stuff about cultural differences between nations, and I'm not for a moment underestimating that big cultural difference that exists between the two countries, and change is probably going to happen quite slowly, I should think.
Yes, and I think that even the decision to take a loan in the UK, I think kids and young adults, they are, let's say, more independent in their decisions, because here, without support of parents, I doubt that any kid will really dare to apply for a loan. I don't think this will be, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, this is where the loan system is so different, because it's not like borrowing from a bank. There's no credit check. There's no credit checks at all. And you don't go to prison if you don't pay it back. It's automatically deducted from your pay. So people, they know it's a debt, but they don't feel it's like a loan in the same way as a bank loan is. But again, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not saying that we can just lift what we have in the UK and transport it to Uzbekistan.
But it would be great.
And the other thing, I mean, I was talking to Alisha this morning. The other thing is that the government needs to step back from control over the higher education sector. The decisions, it's the universities that know best. They know best what the students need. They know best which courses to run and which ones not to run. They know best where to invest and where not to invest. And the current situation where everything has to go up to the top for decisions to be made, it means that it's incredibly inflexible. And again, I know that's a cultural difference. You know, and it stretches all the way back to the Soviet era. But again, the UK was quite similar. It was very much top down as well until the early 1990s. So, and it's taken time for that change to come about.
Yes, exactly. I think that the university, they have to become more independent and self-financed as well, because then they will be able to identify those courses that are really like profitable and promising, and basically there'll be like regular market situation here where supply will be equal to demand and everybody would be happy. Not like really having those quotas for most demanded places in certain universities that basically that repeats year after year.
And the thing is, I remember when I went to university in the early 1990s, the name started, but the degrees were very traditional, just like what I've seen in Uzbekistan of very, very academic qualifications, and it just doesn't fit the economy. It doesn't fit what students want, and to be more responsive to students. It's no good relying on government. And I understand that government has the best of intentions. I hope it does, but they don't have that knowledge. And again, if the money follows the student, then it's in the interest of universities to meet student demand. So if students sign up en masse to do, I don't know, business studies, then they create more places. And at the moment, you have the reverse of that. You just have, as you say, quotas. You don't really listen to what students are demanding or want. Can I ask what people think the chances of change are? Because again, I spoke to Alisha this morning. He was saying that things are changing. That the cap on numbers has been increased. And there is potential for universities to keep more of their the money from student fees, but it appears to me that these changes are very, very small, and I have concerns that it's not going to lead to a big expansion in higher education. Any thoughts? Okay, I think we're going to wrap this up. I'm so sorry about the quality of the connection. I have the feeling that my signal has been lost a number of times. So my sincere apologies for all of the trouble that's been caused. And I look forward to talking about these ideas in more detail in the future. So thank you very much. All the best and see you soon.
Thank you. Have a good evening.